Greetings, citizens of the United States. We are anonymous. We are going to tell you the information we had dug up and present to you from the website, which will be in the description. Please pay attention, as this is important for you to understand the Jade Helm operations. Now, with the document, the Special Operations Command for the U.S. Army may be preparing to blend in during its mock engagement of hostile populations in the U.S. Southwest this summer. But first, it is going on the offense to counter the claims of conspiracy theorists about the true nature of the controversial Jade Helm 15 exercises. The Army Times reported, the U.S. Army Special Operations Command says that, contrary to reports circulating on conspiracy websites, it has no plans to invade Texas. Some fringe websites have paraded a PowerPoint presentation, reportedly from USASOC, as evidence of Jade Helm 15, a series of military exercises across California, Nevada, Arizona, New Mexico, Utah, Colorado, and Texas. They say it will train the U.S. military to suppress American citizens rebelling in a coming military coup or civil war. It is a training exercise. Just a regular training exercise? Lastoria said of Jade Helm, which USASOC documentation references, as a training exercise in at least one previous year as well. The article singled out reports from InfoWars and All News Pipeline, among others, stressing concern about the preparations for martial law. Conspiracy websites painted language regarding civilian impact as revealing of the true nature of the mission to prepare for abducting dissidents from their homes. Many of the conspiracy sites have focused in on the selection of Texas as a hostile territory. To them, a high degree of libertarian support, pro-gun leanings and patriotism make Texas a target. The slides also mark Utah and a pocket in Southern California as hostile, while New Mexico is uncertain in terms to leading hostile, and Arizona is uncertain in terms to leaning friendly. The presentation slides say the area was chosen for its large undeveloped tracts of land and low population density. Texas in particular was chosen as the hub of the operation, because it has been traditionally military-friendly. Easing the impact or alarm the forces presence might impose on localities. According to the slides, though disputing any ill intent, the Army Times admits that the Jade Helm drill is real, and that soldiers have trained for the approach mastering the human domain before. A civilian research project paper from the U.S. Army Special Operations Forces states, the human domain is the totality of the physical, cultural and social environments that influence human behavior to the extent that success of any military operation or campaign depends on the application of unique capabilities that are designed to fight and win population-centric conflicts. It is a critical and complementary concept to the recognized domains of land, air, maritime, space and cyberspace. In an apparent predecessor to the drill, officers wrote on the need to project military operations and occupation efforts into the human domain in order to engage the social, political, and economic spheres seen as critical for mission success. It is a technological continuation of the double-edged philosophy of the Pentagon and White House to win over hearts and minds over the course of the flawed Vietnam War, a term known in more technical terms as pacification of the population. It has focus on mapping the human terrain, using the expertise and techniques of anthropology, lends credence to the idea that the military are rehearsing scenarios concerning how to deal with the independent-minded and anti-establishment people living inside Texas and Utah, the hostile states identified in the Jade Helm drill. On the human domain, what we know and project about the future operating environment tells us that the significance of the human domain in future conflict is growing, not diminished. The service leaders wrote, one controversial tool to aid in the collection, processing and analysis of information in regards to the human domain has been the Human Terrain System (HTS), in which social scientists, primarily anthropologists, have been utilized to conduct research and provide analysis to military commanders in support of the military's operations at the height of the program. There were 30 HTS teams in Afghanistan, and despite the challenges of the program, it was widely viewed as providing value. Currently, tools such as PMESII through to the Excel spreadsheet in the British-issued Human Terrain Packs can provide valuable tools to begin the collection and processing of human domain information. In short, it utilizes the PSYOP to persuade the population with co-opted leaders and copious amounts of propaganda and more subtle means of compliance and coercion. While watchful Americans shudder at the possibilities suggested by these training exercises, those who have been involved in these humanitarian occupation campaigns throughout the convoluted and dragged-out Afghanistan war have pointed to its profound failures. The use of short-term aid and relief programs as part of counterinsurgency has been ineffectual, and that, in places such as Afghanistan, it may even have undermined the overall military goal of defeating insurgents. After all, the tactic, as its cries of peace play against a backdrop of a military invasion, are as chilling and empty as the words of a Martian visitor repeating, "We come in peace," before attacking a stunned and off-guard opponent. What history does teach us it is good for, however, is dealing with dissidents and stifling opposition. Many of the conspiracy theorists watching the event so closely have suggested that Jade Helm type exercises are the perfect pretexts for red list operations. Meanwhile, someone caught footage of a drill in Florida, wherein military personnel rounded up citizen role players and loaded them into vans for rendition. And here's the clip. Photos from an exercise in Connecticut suggest similar urban warfare training with specialized units going house to house. The question we should be asking right now: what are they really training for? We will keep you up to date on what is going on with Jade Helm exercise. If you have any information you have, please do leave some links, as we need to investigate this and keep up with them.
Got some news for you now. FEMA camp roundup drills in Fort Lauderdale. Well, it is not a hoax. The Sun Sentinel has reported, and now video has surfaced of Special Forces operations taking place under the cover of night in Broward County, Florida. The shocking video shows Black Hawk helicopters flying low and landing as Americans are marched single file through the city streets and then loaded into white vans taken to mock internment camps. Frightening video. Now 200 military personnel from all four branches of the military took part in this coordinated drill, the locations of which were not disclosed to the public prior to the urban warfare training exercise. Now the Sentinel is reporting that, quote, the goal is to prepare participants in realistic, unfamiliar training conditions before they deploy for combat overseas. However, concerned citizens are not buying it, and they believe there is a dual purpose for the action, and that is to train soldiers for real-life domestic martial law. Likewise, it's important to note that the Jade Helm exercises have recently labeled Texas and Utah as hostile territories in documents related to that exercise. Now let's flash back to 2009. The web was then ablaze with the revelation that the National Guard was hiring soldiers to become internment camp specialists.
Military Occupational Specialty, Internment Resettlement Specialist. The Army's Internment Resettlement Specialist plays an integral role in providing a uniform system of handling prisoners and detainees. First and always, these MPs are combat support soldiers, trained to fight. Then as internment resettlement specialists, trained to control and supervise detainees, to ensure humane treatment, and to assist them in returning to a productive life. For this job, you must qualify for a secret clearance.
Now, for those of you watching right now thinking that this is just some crank conspiracy nonsense and Americans will never be rounded up and forced into camps, I'll leave you with the words of Supreme Court Justice Antonin Scalia. Now, he recently said in February of 2014, he issued a stark warning when he spoke to a group of students at the University of Hawaii. Now, he was responding to a question about the 1944 Supreme Court ruling that upheld internment of Americans during World War II. He said, quote, "You are kidding yourself if you think the same thing will not happen again. The ruling was wrong, but I would not be surprised to see it happen again. In time of war, it's no justification, but it is the reality." When a Supreme Court justice tells you it will happen again, perhaps we should listen. What do you think? Sound off in the comments section. Like, share, subscribe to the channel. For the Next News Network, I'm Gary Franchi.
What would happen if martial law was declared in America? Article from the website, http://www.thesleuthournal.com. What would happen if martial law was declared in America? April 9, 2015 by Michael Snyder. FEMA camps, government control, martial law, Obama expose. In recent weeks, there has been a lot of concern that an upcoming 8-week military exercise on U.S. soil known as Jade Helm is actually a dress rehearsal for the imposition of martial law in this country. One of the reasons for the high level of concern is that we have seen a dramatic increase in the number of urban warfare exercises conducted by the U.S. military in major U.S. cities over the past decade, including exercises where dissidents are hunted down, arrested and hauled away. As our world becomes increasingly unstable, and as our society rapidly decays from within, many believe that it is only a matter of time before the executive branch will have sufficient excuse to use the extensive martial law powers that it has been accumulating since 9/11. When that day arrives, what will our nation look like? What would actually happen if martial law was declared in America? Well, the first thing that you need to know is that the U.S. Constitution would be suspended. In other words, you would suddenly have no rights at all. There would be no freedom of speech, no freedom of the press, no freedom of assembly, and you could be arrested at any time for any reason whatsoever. For the duration of the emergency, the military would be in control. There would be troops in the streets, a curfew would almost certainly be imposed, and armed checkpoints would be set up. If the emergency lasted long enough, we would probably see authorities go house to house confiscating firearms, ammunition and food supplies. And perhaps most troubling of all, dissidents and subversives would likely be rounded up and imprisoned. Perhaps you don't think that this could ever happen in the United States in 2015. Well, we do know that this is precisely what the FBI had a plan to do in the 1950s. The following is an excerpt from a recent RT article. Documents show the FBI created a Plan C during the Cold War, which could have been triggered in the event the US underwent a nuclear attack. It included putting the nation under martial law, rounding up subversives, and interning enemy diplomats. The documents, acquired by transparency journalism organization MUCRAC, detail the FBI plan created in 1956, which was shared with several top officials from every governmental department. The FBI also distributed papers regarding the plan to its field offices. The plan would have gone into effect after a war has begun in which the US is involved, or may become involved, and prior to an actual attack on the US itself. According to the documents, under Plan C, martial law would be declared and the FBI would enact its emergency detention program, which entailed apprehending individuals whose affiliations with subversive organizations are so pronounced that their continued liberty in the event of a national emergency would present a serious threat to the internal security of the country. The document shows that as of April 1956, almost 13,000 people were scheduled for apprehension in an emergency. Very sobering. And we do know that the federal government had a list of at least 8 million names of people that were considered to be threats to national security back in the 1980s. This list was known as Main Core, and it is not known whether this list still exists today. I have a feeling that it does, and that it is probably much larger than it was back then. We also know that government documents produced during the Obama administration openly discuss rounding up dissidents and taking them to internment camps. Just consider the following example from InfoWars. A leak 2012 U.S. Army Military Police Training Manual, entitled Civil Disturbance Operations, described how soldiers would be ordered to confiscate firearms and kill American dissidents. The manual also revealed that prisoners would be detained in temporary internment camps and re-educated to gain a new appreciation of U.S. policies. In accordance with U.S. Army FM 3:19.40 internment and resettlement operations. So who would those dissidents be exactly? In 72 types of Americans that are considered potential terrorists. In official government documents, I detailed how official U.S. government documents specifically identify those that believe in conspiracy theories as possible threats. Others that the government is concerned about include those opposed to abortion, globalism, communism, illegal immigration, the United Nations and the New World Order. I wish that none of this was true. Go check out the article for yourself. Another very disturbing government document talks about the need for the U.S. Army to prepare to battle political dissidents in megacities and to neutralize groups who can influence the lives of the population while undermining the authority of the state. Here is more from InfoWars. The U.S. Army is preparing to fight political dissidents who challenge the power of the state as megacities become the battleground of the future, according to a new report in the Army Times. The article details how the Army's Capabilities Integration Center ARCIC work with US Army Special Operations Command, the Chief of Staff's Strategic Studies Group and the UK's Ministry of Defence earlier this year to wargame the future of armed combat, which will revolve around the neutralization of groups who can influence the lives of the population while undermining the authority of the state. A chillingly vague description, which could easily be applied to political dissidents. The plan foresees an unprecedented realignment of U.S. military strategy focused around putting boots on the ground in megacities to deal with politically dispossessed populations while relying on more lethal and more autonomous methods. Very alarming stuff. And if we did see martial law declared nationwide, it is likely that all elections would be suspended indefinitely. That could also potentially include the 2016 presidential election. Is it possible that Barack Obama could use his emergency powers to stay in the White House beyond this second term? There are some out there that believe that this could actually happen under the right circumstances. For example, check out what Dr. Ben Carson said during an appearance on the Alan Colmes radio show. Colmes: what do you mean though, when you say there may not be an election in 2016? Dr. Ben Carson: there may be so much anarchy going on. Colmes: anarchy? So you really think we risking an anarchic America to the point where elections might be put on hold, or some kind of emergency is declared with such anarchy that there wouldn't be a presidential election in a couple of years? Dr. Ben Carson: I don't want to find out. I really don't want to find out. I don't want to continue down this pathway that we be going down. And the groundwork has certainly been laid for such a scenario. During his time in the White House, Barack Obama has signed a series of executive orders that give him and his minions an extraordinary amount of power in the event of a major national emergency. For example, read the following excerpt from an executive order that Obama signed in March 20, 12 seconds 201. Priorities and Allocations Authorities. The authority of the President conferred by Section 101 of the Act, 50 U.S.C. Act 2071, to require acceptance and priority performance of contracts or orders other than contracts of employment, to promote the national defense over performance of any other contracts or orders, and to allocate materials, services, and facilities, as deemed necessary or appropriate to promote the national defense, is delegated to the following agency heads. 1. The Secretary of Agriculture with respect to food resources, food resource facilities, livestock resources, veterinary resources, plant health resources, and the domestic distribution of farm equipment and commercial fertilizer. 2. The Secretary of Energy with respect to all forms of energy. 3. The Secretary of Health and Human Services with respect to health resources. 4. The Secretary of Transportation with respect to all forms of civil transportation. 5. The Secretary of Defense with respect to water resources. And 6. The Secretary of Commerce with respect to all other materials, services, and facilities, including construction materials. That sounds like it covers just about everything. Basically, during a time of martial law, all of the things that you take for granted today would be out the window. You would have no rights. And the federal government would be able to do just about anything that it wanted to do. If that sounds really bad to you, then maybe now you are starting to understand why so many people get upset when they see preparations being made for the eventual imposition of martial law in this country. This article I am about to read to you is from http://www.dcclothesline.com 2015, 03/29 Death domes are the endgame for Jade Helm 15. I have been incapacitated for the past 36 hours, and am still not able to speak clearly. However, that does not mean that the flow of information regarding Jade Helm 15 has slowed down. With regard to Jade Helm 15, there are enigmas upon mysteries based upon false flag events. And the biggest false flag event is tied to the notion that Russians have penetrated the territorial boundary of the lower 48. Yes, it is true that the Russians have a presence inside of the United States courtesy of the Obama administration. However, the notion that the Russians are preparing to arm Texas-based insurgents, who favor withdrawing from the United States, is not true. The following does represent accurate reporting insofar of what has been released. However, the following represents a PSYOPS operation. In other words, it is a false flag. The false flag premise: according to the scenario, the United States is arming the military forces of Georgia and the insurgents in Kiev. Russia views these actions by the U.S. as an act of war. In retaliation, Russian troops have been infiltrating the United States via Canada, and they plan to support a civil war in the American Southwest, which will commence in Texas. This premise further states that Jade Helm 15 is designed to stop the Russian attempts to foment a civil war inside of the United States. Jade Helm 15 and common sense: this information is flawed on its face. Geographically, it makes no sense for the Russians to initiate an action by coming in through Canada, which would be thousands of miles from their intended action. It makes infinitely more sense to initiate such an insurgency close to the target, in Mexico, where there is no security to speak of. Further, if Jade Helm 15 is designed to thwart this Russian action, then why isn't the drill being initiated at the point of territorial penetration, namely near the Canadian border? Also, Canada and the United States have very strong mutual defense treaties. If Russians were coming through our northern border without the permission of the Obama administration, the Canadians are obligated to act. Jade Helm 15 and the leaked Russian plans to start a civil war in Texas. What we are witnessing here is an attempt on the part of the Obama administration to plant stories which support the Russian intent to wreak havoc inside our country. And they are doing it by hiding their disguised purpose in plain sight. No American in their right mind would support a Russian-inspired overthrow of the U.S. government, whether it would be in one state or in all 50, and this is exactly what the Obama administration is counting on. As this information has been leaked to the alternative media, the reaction was predictable. Most Americans would come to support Jade Helm 15, if they were to come to believe that the drill was designed to stop such an action. Death domes and Edna, Texas. A very revealing clue as to the intent of Jade Helm 15 comes to us from the growing coincidental presence of death domes. There are 28 known death domes in Texas. The New York Times describes death domes as dual-use domes. In the case of Edna, Texas, the local high school graciously accepted one such dome, to double as its gymnasium as well as being a shelter against raging hurricanes. Death domes can house thousands of unsuspecting Americans. The death domes are nearly escape-proof, as the steel rods supporting the facility go 30 feet underground. The walls are double-layered made of cinder block reinforced by steel bars. The most telling aspect of this death dome is that they are FEMA-funded. Funny, I did not think that there was supposed to be any FEMA camps. The true purpose of Jade Helm, the release of the information that Russians are coming through Canada to start a civil in Texas, is a PSYOPS, and not a very clever one at that. As this false flag rumor begins to spread, the masses of sheep in this country will come to support any action designed to thwart such an action by the Russians. Another revealing aspect of JH-15 is that the operations are to take place at night. When did the Nazi roundups of the Jews take place? The extractions took place at night. On Friday, March 27, 2015, I was interviewed by Nick Rajkovic, a news reporter for News Radio 740 KTRH in Houston. In the course of the interview, Rajkovic informed me that he had interviewed a sheriff's deputy, and was told that Jade Helm 15 was practicing extractions of dissidents. The extractions will transport the dissidents to the death domes for final disposition. This article is from the website and there are several videos on there, and there will be links in the description. Right now, a military operation is taking place in 10 states. Any other country would call this precisely what it is: training for martial law. In direct violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, which I cover in detail in my post titled, "Us Army Has Ads on the Internet Seeking Internment Camp and Resettlement Camp Specialists." Operation Jade Helm is an 8-week exercise being conducted by the United States military and the Interagency and Unconventional Warfare. Pre-OBAMA, Posse Comitatus has stood in this country as law for over 137 years, essentially forbidding the use of the U.S. military to police its own citizens. Hope and Change took care of that. Operation Jade Helm is designed to simulate a military response to an uprising of the American people. Obama has known since day one that his plans did not even resemble anything constitutional, and it is expected that eventually we the people will snap and try to take our country back. When we do, Obama and the rest of Crime Incorporated will be ready for us. Being the clever little shit that he is, Obama duped the Democrats into not reading the National Defense Authorization Act, which essentially did away with Posse Comitatus, and did away with the entire Bill of Rights with the exception of the Second Amendment, and we all know how hard Obama is working on that one. Make no mistake, Obama is absolutely coming for the guns. As you can see by the map below, the forbidden military operation now takes up 10 states including Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, Nevada, Utah and Colorado, Mississippi, Florida and Louisiana. Now, we are learning that infiltration exercises will be incorporated in the drills, from InfoWars. A Houston Chronicle report reveals that soldiers will attempt to blend in with the local population in an effort to test the effectiveness of infiltration techniques. Residents will be advised to report suspicious activity during the exercise. They are going to set up cells of people and test how well they are able to move around without getting too noticed in the community, said Roy Boyd, chief deputy with the Victoria County Sheriff's Office. They are testing their abilities to basically blend in with the local environment, and not stand out and blow their cover. By directly involving unwitting members of the local population, this aspect of the drill contradicts the Army's assertion that the public can expect nothing much different from their day-to-day activities, since much of exercise will be conducted in remote areas. Jim Stewart, chief deputy with the Brazos County Sheriff's Office, told the Chronicle, that the designation of Texas as hostile territory was merely a way of setting up a role-playing exercise under which soldiers operate behind enemy lines. What exactly is Jade Helm doing, you ask? Dave Hodges of the Common Sense Show reports. Jade Helm's purpose define. Jade Helm is a challenging 8-week joint military and interagency unconventional warfare exercise conducted throughout Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, Nevada, Utah and Colorado. The term, unconventional warfare, makes it clear that this exercise is not dealing with a Russian-backed Red Dawn invasion of the southwestern United States by Russian-backed Latin American partners. UW speaks to the guerrilla warfare, which is asymmetrical nature of the anticipated and rehearsed conflict. Subsequently, it can be conclusively stated that Jade Helm is not preparing for a Red Dawn invasion, rather, they are preparing for a red, white, and blue invasion. This is a massive rehearsal for martial law implementation as well as implementing the proverbial, and much rumored red and blue list and the snatch and grab of key resistance figures from the independent media as well as uncooperative political figures. The various provisions of Jade Helm make it clear just how dangerous this drill truly is. Composition of Jade Helm forces reveals the true purpose of the drills. Thomas Meade, the operations planner for the U.S. Army's Jade Helm realistic military training, has publicly stated that we have Army Green Berets, Navy SEALs, Marine Special Operations Command, the 82nd Airborne Division, and we also have some of our interagency partners such as the FBI and the Joint Personnel Recovery Agency, that will be working with us. The use of Green Berets, Navy SEALs and Special Operations Command forces speaks to the unconventional composition of the overall makeup of this group. Among the many duties for these three special operations groups include infrastructure raids, assassination of key enemy personnel, reconnaissance, and extraction of key enemy personnel for detention and/or intelligence gathering. It is the latter duty that has me concerned, as there has been much discussion over the execution of a red list, in which key resistance figures would be kidnapped and dealt with in advance of the implementation of martial law. A detailed analysis of the language of Jade Helm has convinced me that we are looking at the implementation of the snatch and grab of key resistance figures to the coming martial law. My sources have told me that in past drills of this nature, Red List extraction troops are helicoptered in the early morning hours at about 3 a.m., land, OFFLOAD personnel, and extract the intended targets, SWAT team style. In the Jade Helm section entitled What to Expect, operation planners state that the public should anticipate increased aircraft in the area at night and may receive noise complaints. What aircraft would be loud enough at night to guarantee noise complaints? My vote would be the helicopters. And who would be on these helicopters at night? What time are snatch and grab activities historically held? And who typically conducts snatch and grab arrests? The answer to these questions would be the Special Operation Forces, which in martial law, would be the Gestapo version of the Green Berets, the Navy SEALs and Marine Special Forces, as they arrive at your home at 3 a.m. Role players will be participating in Jade Helm. In fact, the same section goes on to state that some individuals, in exception to civilian insurgents, may conduct suspicious activities. What would constitute a suspicious activity for the purpose of this drill? Would it consist of potentially being dragged off to a FEMA camp? Would it be engaging in simulated insurgency activities associated with guerrilla war strategies? There are so many possibilities, and they are all associated with civilian resistance against a tyrannical force. Not only is the use of 3 special operations forces suspicious with regard to Jade Helm, but more notably is the announced use of JPRA, and this is a frightening event. The Joint Personnel Recovery Agency maintains a series of training school sites, whose subject matter includes prisoners of war, hostages and detainees, evasion and escape, search and rescue, prison survival techniques and experiences, geography and cartography, natural science, ethnology, and country studies, terrorism, military and naval science, natural and emergency medicine. The majority of the above definition makes it clear that the intent of JPRA is to teach POW survival skills, at least until they use the word detainee. Please allow me to call your attention to the term detainee. In layman's language, the term detainee simply means someone who is a prisoner of the military occupation force from the U.S. government. To the average person, the use of the term detainee would not raise an eyebrow, but to someone who is tuned with the connotations and denotations of military parlance, the term detainee holds specific meaning, as evidenced by the following document, which is considered by many to be a blueprint manual, created by the Army, for martial law and FEMA camp incarceration for political prisoners. Example: Dissenters. Restricted U.S. Army Internment and Resettlement Operations Manual. May 2, 2012. FM 3, 39.40 Internment and Resettlement Operations. U.S. Army running ads to staff these detention centers since 2009. They are still running. If there is anyone out there that still wants to deny that FEMA camps exist, if my post titled, "Do Not Miss Martial Law? Elements to Watch For" did not finally open your eyes, then this better, otherwise I don't give you very good odds for lasting long when the chaos begins. I'm always amazed at how people can be programmed by the mainstream media to ignore the obvious reality happening right in front of their eyes. Right now, America is being lulled into a hypnotic sense of denial, while military training for martial law is happening right in their own neighborhoods and city streets. Yet, strangely, no one is allowed to refer to this exercise as training for martial law, even though that's obviously what it is. Most Americans remain totally unaware of the fact that a massive military drill spanning 10 U.S. states will soon put military troops, helicopters, armored transports and military weapons directly on the streets of communities across the nation. Operation Jade Helm begins in July and will last for 8 weeks, reports the Daily Mail. Soldiers will operate in and around towns in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, Nevada, Utah and Colorado, where some of them will drop from planes, while carrying weapons loaded with blanks, in what military officials have dubbed realistic military training. The military drill labels Texas and Utah hostile territory, where military special ops personnel are supposed to try to covertly move among the public, undetected. As reported in the Houston Chronicle, they're going to set up cells of people and test how well they're able to move around without getting too noticed in the community, said Roy Boyd, chief deputy with the Victoria County Sheriff's Office. They're testing their abilities to basically blend in with the local environment, and not stand out and blow their cover. Operation Jade Helm is fully described in this unclassified document, which was first publicized by InfoWars and All News Pipeline. Both sites were heavily criticized for suggesting this martial law drill was a martial law drill. In precisely the same way, anyone who says the stock market reflects a massive bubble is also heavily criticized, even though the stock market, indeed, reflects a massive bubble. It is wildly overvalued thanks to the Fed's money creation schemes. It is notable in America that Brian Williams, the discredited NBC News anchor, who lied to the world about his fictitious journalism escapades, was suspended for 6 months for lying. Had he been caught telling the truth about the real news, however, he would have been fired for life. In America today, no truthful analysis or reporting is allowed on any subject that really matters, and the primary function of the news media is to conduct elaborate theater that distracts people from the real world happening around them. Part of this effort involves programming people to physiologically delete from their awareness things which are happening right in front of them. Is this really possible? Absolutely. Read about the invisible gorilla on the basketball court experiment, in which people fail to see a gorilla right in front of them. Mainstream media says there's nothing to worry about when the military infiltrates your local cities and towns. Covert warfare coming to Texas sparks some fears of federal takeover, reports the Houston Chronicle. And InfoWars.com, which has been digging into the story better than any other news outlet at the moment, has even more to report. As the Daily Mail recites, Alex Jones warns that Jade Helm is simply an effort to test the effectiveness of infiltration techniques on the American public. They're having Delta Force, Navy SEALs with the Army trained to basically take over. InfoWars Alex Jones said Sunday Texas is listed as a hostile sector, and of course, we're here defending the Republic. Stripes Com predictably calls any concern about the martial drills alarmist, and insists this is all about national security. This exercise is routine training, to maintain a high level of readiness for Army Special Operations Forces, because they must be ready to support potential missions anywhere in the world on a moment's notice, USASOC spokesman Army Lieutenant Colonel Mark Lastoria said, as reported by Stripes. Stripes, however, does not explain the peculiar choice of training grounds for the military, the streets, parks and properties of towns and cities across America. Since when did the military declare your local community a covert ops training theater for armed soldiers and more equipment? Martial law training already underway on the streets of Fort Lauderdale, Florida. An important video from W777 describes capturing a scene of apparent martial law training in downtown Fort Lauderdale just 2 nights ago. As you can see from the still photos taken from the video, soldiers equipped with night vision gear and rifles are now on the streets. In this apparent martial law training drill caught on video, arrested citizens are rounded up and forced to march single file, led by an armed soldier with night vision gear and a rifle. This marching arrangement is exactly the way prisoners of war marched into the prison camps in a war scenario. Here, soldiers are practicing arresting citizens at gunpoint after throwing them to the ground. Apache helicopters are conducting landings and takeoffs right in the middle of the city. A partial squad of soldiers patrols the street, as part of the roundup practice arrest of citizens. Reality check. This would be called a martial law drill? Anywhere else? Let's step back for a minute and ask the question of how the U.S. press would report on exactly the same military operations, if they were taking place in a nation like Russia. Suppose Russia decided to deploy soldiers, helicopters, tanks and covert operations units in the border near Ukraine, or Georgia or anywhere that it might currently label hostile territory. The deployment of military personnel in civilian areas, to conduct operations in the very backyards of everyday citizens would likely be condemned by the U.S. State Department, as a form of military intimidation of the population. If North Korea, China or Pakistan conducted a Jade Helm military drill in their own civilian cities and towns, such activities would be immediately and accurately seen by the West, as drills for the military-enforced martial law. But when such drills take place in America, any person who points out the obvious is immediately branded a lunatic. When martial law military drills happen in the United States, we are told, they really aren't martial law military drills at all. Nope. You're just imagining that you're seeing armed soldiers with night vision gear conducting mass arrests of citizens on the streets of America. You're not supposed to see the guerrillas standing right in front of you. Is it really crazy to point out that the military has no need whatsoever to train among civilian populations, unless that same military plans to engage those civilians in a martial law scenario? After all, how is this training more realistic, if the populations being targeted in the training aren't in the crosshairs of some future planned military action? The idea that training among small towns in the USA is supposed to provide realism for operating in Afghanistan or Iraq is utterly absurd. For one thing, small towns in America don't have teams of local rebels setting up roadside IEDs to destroy Humvees and their occupants. Special Forces operatives are more likely to encounter people hurrying their way to Starbucks than trying to run any sort of armed resistance actions. No, military training on the streets of America isn't realistic training for fighting wars overseas. It is only realistic for military action that takes place on the streets of America itself. Jade Helm seems designed to provoke violent conflict with Texas ranchers. Even worse, this idea that U.S. military special forces operatives are supposed to be sneaking around small towns in central Texas is almost begging for an escalation of potentially violent conflict with private ranch owners, most of whom are well armed, and constantly dealing with illegal immigrants trespassing and stealing valuables from their property. The staging of military drills in rural Texas seriously concerns me. Although no Texas rancher would knowingly open fire on U.S. soldiers, Texans are generally very supportive of the military and especially of veterans. Don't the Pentagon's covert activities raise the risk of a friendly fire shooting incident in places like rural Texas, where a squad of soldiers might be mistaken for an armed gang of thieves? As a simple matter of fact, Texas ranch owners don't take kindly to strangers tromping across their fields in the middle of the night. Are Special Forces soldiers seriously going to move cross-country through central Texas, across private ranches in the middle of the night, in firearms range of private property owners, who are already have itchy trigger fingers, due to the illegal immigration crime wave that's threatening them? The Pentagon's choice of Central Texas as a covert ops training ground seems to be extremely irresponsible and possibly even intended as a provocation of either accidental friendly fire or direct hostilities between rural Texans and the U.S. military. Anyone familiar with Texas culture can't help but realize the active labeling of Texas as hostile territory appears to be a deliberate attempt by the Pentagon to provoke such hostilities in Texas and possibly use such provoked hostilities to justify a heightened military presence in the targeted areas. That's how a martial law drill could very quickly become active martial law for real. A violation of U.S. law. Anyone who thinks the U.S. military is training in Bastrop, Texas so that they can fight enemy insurgents in Fallujah is failing to see the gorilla in the room. Operation Jade Helm is, without question, an illegal martial law drill intended to prepare the troops for deployment against civilian populations in America. Its very existence is a direct violation of the Posse Comitatus Act, which prohibits the U.S. military from functioning as domestic police. My analysis: this looks very likely to be part of military readiness training for the social chaos that's likely to follow the inevitable global debt collapse. Come to think of it, when all that hits the fan, you and everybody else will probably beg the military to take control of the cities, and quell the rioting that's sure to follow. The next article is from https oneway2day.wordpress.com tag FEMA camps. The Jade Helm 15 drill is a martial law, Civil War end? Red list? Extraction drill. March 19, 2015. From July 15 to September 15, 2015, the U.S. Army Special Operations Command is conducting a massive military drill in an area covering the entire American Southwest. At first glance, I thought this drill was a response to the massive military drills being conducted by Russia. I wrongly assumed that Jade Helm 15 was a drill designed to protect the Southwest from an invasion by Russian-backed Latin American military forces, i.e. Red Dawn. However, after reading the operational plan of Jade Helm, it is clear that this drill is about the brutal martial law subjugation of the people of Texas, Utah and Southern California, who have risen up against some unspecified tyranny. Further, this drill is also about martial law being used as a preventative measure in states which might lean towards civil war against the United States government, in exceptions of California, Nevada, Colorado, Arizona and New Mexico. The operational elements and impact of Jade Helm 15 cannot be considered in isolation. A careful analysis reveals how this drill is connected to Army policies associated with the confinement of detainees in what is commonly called FEMA camps. This drill is undoubtedly the most frightening thing to occur on American soil since the Civil War. Red Dawn or martial law preparations. Jade Helm's purpose define. Jade Helm is a challenging 8-week joint military and interagency unconventional warfare exercise conducted throughout Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, Nevada, Utah and Colorado. The term, unconventional warfare, makes it clear that this exercise is not dealing with a Russian-backed Red Dawn Invasion of the southwestern United States by Russian-backed Latin American partners. UW speaks to the guerrilla warfare nature of the anticipated and rehearsed conflict. Subsequently, it can be conclusively stated that Jade Helm is not preparing for a Red Dawn invasion, rather, they are preparing for a red, white and blue invasion. This is a massive rehearsal for martial law implementation as well as implementing the proverbial, and much rumored red and blue list and the snatch and grab. Extractions of key resistance figures from the independent media as well as uncooperative political figures. The various provisions of Jade Helm make it clear just how dangerous this drill truly is. Composition of Jade Helm forces reveals the true purpose of the drills. Thomas Meade, the operations planner for the U.S. Army's Jade Helm realistic military training, has publicly stated that we have Army Green Berets, Navy SEALs, Marine Special Operations Command, the 82nd Airborne Division, and we also have some of our interagency partners, such as the DEA, FBI and the Joint Personnel Recovery Agency, that will be working with us. The use of Green Berets, Navy SEALs and Special Operations Command forces speaks to the unconventional composition of the overall makeup of this group. Among the many duties for these three special operations groups include infrastructure raids, assassination of key enemy personnel, reconnaissance, and extraction of key enemy personnel for detention and/or intelligence gathering. It is the latter duty that has me concerned, as there has been much discussion over the execution of a red list, in which key resistance figures would be kidnapped and dealt with in advance of the implementation of martial law. A detailed analysis of the language of Jade Helm has convinced me that we are looking at the implementation of the snatch and grab of key resistance figures to the coming martial law. My sources have told me that in past drills of this nature, red list extraction troops are helicoptered in the early morning hours. Example is 3 a.m. to land, offload personnel and extract the intended targets, SWAT team style. In the Jade Helm section entitled What to Expect, operation planners state that the public should anticipate increased aircraft in the area at night, and may receive noise complaints. What aircraft would be loud enough at night to guarantee noise complaints? My vote would be the helicopters. And who would be on these helicopters at night? What time are snatch and grab activities historically held? And who typically conducts snatch and grab arrests? The answer to these questions would be the Special Operation Forces, which in martial law would be the Gestapo version of the Green Berets, the Navy SEALs and Marine Special Forces, as they arrive at your home at 3 a.m. Role players will be participating in Jade Helm. In fact, the same section goes on to state that some individuals, i.e. civilian insurgents, may conduct suspicious activities. What would constitute a suspicious activity for the purpose of this drill? Would it consist of pretending to be dragged off to a FEMA camp? Would it be engaging in simulated insurgency activities associated with guerrilla war strategies? There are so many possibilities, and they are all associated with civilian resistance against a tyrannical force. Not only is the use of 3 special operations forces suspicious with regard to Jade Helm, but more notably is the announced use of JPRA, and this is a frightening event. The Joint Personnel Recovery Agency maintains a series of training school sites, whose subject matter includes prisoners of war, hostages and detainees. Emphasis added, evasion and escape, search and rescue, prison survival techniques and experiences, geography and cartography, natural science, ethnology, and country studies, terrorism, military and naval science, natural and emergency medicine. The majority of the above definition makes it clear that the intent of JPRA is to teach POW survival skills, at least until they use the word detainee. Please allow me to call your attention to the term detainee. In layman's language, the term detainee simply means someone who is a prisoner of the military occupation force, in exception of the U.S. government. To the average person, the use of the term detainee would not raise an eyebrow, but to someone who is tuned with the connotations and denotations of military parlance, the term detainee holds specific meaning, as evidenced by the following document, which is considered by many to be a blueprint manual, created by the Army, for martial law and FEMA camp incarceration for political prisoners. Example: Dissenters. Restricted U.S. Army Internment and Resettlement Operations Manual, May 2, 2012. FEMA leak-internment camps for dissidents, FM3, 39.40. Internment and Resettlement Operations. FEMA leak document. FM3, 39.40, 1, 5. In Section 1-10 of 3, 39.40. A civilian detainee is a civilian who was interned during armed conflict, occupation, or other military operation for security reasons, for protection, or because he or she committed an offense against the detaining power. In Section 3-56 of 3, 39.40, the following draconian provisions are applied to detainees. 1. Develop SIA products that are designed to pacify and acclimate detainees or DCs to accept USIR facility authority and regulations. Author S. Note: SIA products, such as the use of torture such as waterboarding and sleep deprivation. 2. Gains the cooperation of detainees to reduce the number of guards needed. 3. Identifies malcontents, trained agitators, and political leaders within the facility who may try to organize resistance or create disturbances. 4. Develops and executes indoctrination programs to reduce or remove antagonistic attitudes in exception. Brainwashing of detainees. Identifies political activists. Plans and executes a SIA program that produces an understanding and appreciation of U.S. policies and actions. The use of the word detainee is conspicuous, and as the reader can clearly see, it has specific meaning with regard to a red list extraction action. In effect, this is the black site for political dissidents. Both Jade Helm 15 and the FM3, 39.40 are both Army manuals written exclusively on dealing with civilian personnel in martial law settings. Under the NDAA, designating select citizens as a detainee and holding them indefinitely is legal under this unconstitutional legislation. States participating in Jade Helm. Jade Helm is an 8-week joint military and interagency unconventional warfare exercise that will be conducted in Texas, New Mexico, Arizona, California, Nevada, Utah and Colorado. Jade Helm 15 participants. The color codes of the states listed in the map presented above can be deciphered as follows. The red states of Utah and Texas are listed as hostile states, as is part of Southern California. These states are not geographically contiguous. Subsequently, we are looking at Jade Helm 15 as being the suppression of civil resistance. The jackboots preparing for Civil War use of the 82nd Airborne is also suggestive of the fact that the authorities anticipate that there could be civilian militias rising up, perhaps in combination with veterans groups and possibly military units loyal to the citizens of the United States. The brown state of New Mexico is listed as leaning towards being hostile. The blue states of California, Nevada and Colorado are listed as being loyal, permissive, to military authority and martial law. The light blue state of Arizona is listed as unknown, but leaning toward being friendly. This reads like a Civil War scorecard, similar to the one that President Lincoln must have constructed in 1861 after the attack upon Fort Sumter. The participation of certain interagency partners are very troubling. Repeated reference is made about the cooperation between the Department of Defense and local law enforcement in the Jade Helm document. After reading this document, Program 1.0.3.3 started to make a lot of sense. Program 1.0.3.3 is the militarization of local police with former military equipment such as tanks, machine guns, etc. It is interesting to note that it was the NDAA legislation that created Program 1.0.3.3. Obviously, the purpose of this is to turn the local police into a martial law occupation force. I am not surprised, but very concerned that DHS, listed as an interagency partner, is a part of this drill for the following reasons. Voice of Russia propagandists believe a significant number of American military will not fire upon American citizens. Subsequently, This is the reason for the Russian troop presence in our country, and they will fulfill the role of a martial law occupation force. When I have previously mentioned this, the Russian media has attacked me in the past, as if they have something to hide, and evidence of these attacks can be accessed here and here. What seems logical and something that should frighten all Americans is to wonder if DHS and the Russian partners will be a part of Jade Helm 15. Again, I refer to the video production put together by Sherry Wilcox, in which Russian soldiers have been seen in Tennessee traveling in DHS vehicles, as they entered into western Kentucky. As this related to Jade Helm and martial law, this is ominous. Russian troops will fire upon American citizens. Russian troops will extract American citizens from their beds in the middle of the night. What do you want to bet that Russian troops will be included in Jade Helm 15? Russian troops were included in Grid X2 and the RIMPAC war games, so why not Jade Helm? Yes, I am talking about treason, and it is coming from the top. Published by Sherry. Questioning all. Published on March 4, 2013. Pictures of DHS armored vehicle I took while in Kentucky, as it passed me on the road. The U.S. ordered 2,700 of them for U.S. soil. Tennessee State Guard has stopped the vehicles from coming into Tennessee from Kentucky. The shocking part is the troops that were with the vehicles were Eastern European Russian with DHS uniforms on. There are reports of Russian DHS troops in the Smoky Mountain area that have stopped and questioned people. This information is from a high-ranking Tennessee State Guard official through someone who is a part of the Guard. 22 governors of states formed their own State Guard militias that can never be federalized and will always be state personnel. The federal government can never get the equipment or the personnel, as they are state governor-controlled. Why would the Drug Enforcement Agency become involved in a martial law operation? This makes no sense, unless you read the connection of the compromised D to various Central and South American factions. Example: the possible fifth column presence of MS-13, that I revealed in July of 2014. Conclusion. With regard to the thematic components to this article, there is no conclusion. This is only the beginning. It is quite clear that the Army fully believes, as do their superiors at the Pentagon and at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, that there is the belief that there is going to be something so catastrophic that an American Civil War II will ensue. The reasons behind this event are not the focus of this article. However, I think it is a safe bet that it will have to do with the seizure of bank accounts and retirement accounts. This is a topic that will be explored in a future article. Meanwhile, Americans in the Southwest need to be concerned that this drill does not go live like so many of these drills seem to in advance of a false flag drill. Every political activist, uncooperative politician and member of the independent media needs to be thinking about where they want to be from July 15th to September 15th. It would be best to be where they ain't. After reading the articles for you in this long presentation, you decide what you believe. It is up to you to decide about what you heard in this video. So please do some research on Jade Helm to get a better understanding. We are anonymous. We are legion. We do not forgive. We do not forget. Expect us.